the floor to give a brief description of whatever you want to.
I will give a quick introduction, though. Thank you. Just 10 more seconds. Okay. Amanda, you can go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. This is Essence of Medicine. Today, we're going to be discussing a surgeon's life journey. We have our guest, Dr. Robert Masson, joining us today.
I'm Dr. Abbasi for Essence of Life. Now, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce somebody that could be a role model for lots of young people who are considering to go to medicine or to become a surgeon. I have been following Dr. Masson for a very long time, and he's very active, and he is somebody who has always inspired me. And practically, I'm modeling my own professional life after him. So with that, please, Robert, introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. I mean, very humbling words. We both have such a similar passion. And I was here a little earlier, but there's no doubt in my mind that your propulsion was going to happen with or without me being there. So it's been fun to watch. So I'm really grateful. Yeah, I'm a lifelong competitor, lifelong athlete. I still identify that way. I still think that way. I think it led to a level of push, a level of rebellion. My grandfather on my mother's side was a test pilot and military aviator, and original Gates Flying Circus member in early aviation. So I had all these early adventure, far-reaching rebellion. My archetype has always been scout, not researcher, not engaged in the moment, but really more engaged in pushing the moment and propelling the moment. And that's what I enjoy. That's what I'm passionate about. One of our taglines with me and my kids is be comfortable being uncomfortable. It's well past. Don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. We actually are comfortable being uncomfortable. So it's a little bit rebellious, a little bit different. And that's really set my boundaries for my neurosurgical career. But I also have come at it from to your point about serving the younger generation. Burnout has been such a broadly held topic in the last several years. And when we grew up, boy, nobody cared about that. It was a sign of weakness. But the reality is I recognized early that as doctors, I felt like we had to be role models. And I felt there was a certain degree of hypocrisy fundamentally in healthcare where, we didn't live the talk at all. And so early on, I decided that balance was critical, and physical balance, mental balance, health, family, longevity, the stamina. We're marathon runners. We're not sprinters. The careers that we've chosen are lifelong, ideally, and have the most value over extended time. So you got to balance yourself and pace yourself. And I think this new generation gets that. I think we also have the opportunity now to resonate that and transcend the value of hard work and the gratification that comes with propelling what we do, and yet finding balance. So all of these things, I think, are the things that you and I see in each other and watch each other grow. And I'm privileged to be here. So thank you.
Well, first of all, every sentence you said inspired me to ask you 5 follow-up questions, but I'm going to let the ladies go first.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So that was very eloquent, very well said. It actually, like Dr. Abbasi said, led me to a few additional questions. My first question is, throughout your career, I'm sure this has changed a lot, but what's one of the ways that you balance your personal life and your work life?
It's been, honestly, I'm a little OCD if you haven't seen it already. And it's in all aspects of everything I do. I mean, I invest heavily on the front end of anything and everything I do. And much like Dr. Abazi's procedures, I'm accurate early. I prepare early. I prepare excessively, and every detail is really designed to run downhill. So I invest in building teams. I invest in building efficiencies. I invest in building sequences that work best. The accuracy of the way I do what I do is learned obsessively. So, you don't waste a lot of time when you construct your environment like that. And there's so much downtime. There's so much wasted time. And if you're watching my current project with surgery logistics and computing systems and mixed reality and AI, you see the eventuality of all of these obsessions. But I think things like that don't happen accidentally. And we're not taught in the educational process to build efficiency, to build process, to build structure, to build a design of what you want your life to look like. And it's so ironic that we're the ones who have to show people how to live healthy lifestyles, because that's actually something that's discouraged, at least in our generation. And and I never accepted that. I never agreed with it, and I wasn't scared to work hard. But I enjoy working hard, but I enjoy playing hard, and I enjoy living hard. And and I was unapologetic about stealing that personal time back. And I really didn't care what anyone thought or said otherwise. So that commitment, that structure, that deliberate organization is something I think that we all can steal back a little bit. We talk about master servant paradox. I've done 6 keynote addresses in the last several years about master servant paradox and who's your master, who's your servant. And it's all about the little box that we're all put in by our community, by our institutions, by our hospital systems, by the payers. To me, my patient community is my master. I'm master to the institutions. I'm master to industry. I'm master to healthcare systems. Why? Because I bring my community to them if they're lucky enough to get them, and if they're willing to serve me to serve them. And so that's a tiny example of the imbalance that we can find ourselves in the healthcare industry, which is very traditionally the opposite. So these are philosophical belief systems that I celebrate, I push hard. Not everybody wants to deal with the pushback, but I don't mind dealing with the pushback.
Well, sometimes my children are asking me, Robert, that they see how hard I'm working, and I know you and I are in a similar situation. Sometimes they ask me, if I was back in time, would I do it again?
Right.
I want to ask you that, but before we go that, my answer to them is, I don't know anything else. I wouldn't know anything else to do. And you mentioned that burnout, and I think I can speak for lots of high-level surgeons. Work doesn't burn us out.
Right, exactly.
Care of the patient never burn us out. You and I had this conversation a while back about what burns it out, and I, as eloquently as you put it, our masters are our patients.
Right.
And everything else should be serving us, helping us to serve our patient.
Right.
When we become irrelevant by this hospital system, by this system that practically put us aside and try to use us like commodities, then that is where I think where we feel that we cannot do what we are trained to do. That is what burns us out. And that's a big deal. I see that again and again. It's not the hours. It's not the night call.
Frustration.
It's the administration in the hospital. It is the system that on the paper they're designed, they say they are there to serve the patient, but they do everything just the opposite. That, I think, what burns us out. But I want to know your opinion on that. When people ask you, would you do that again?
Yeah.
I know there are days that I would say, no, I wouldn't do that again. In those moments, in those few moments that you say, I wish I wasn't doing this, what is that? What is the motivation that you would say it's just too much? Because there are days it's too much even for people like you and I. And
No,
what
yeah.
burns you out? And how do you manage to stay that vigor, keep your vigor in this?
Yeah, so I would argue that I've been at that point probably 7 times in my 35 years. And every time I've done it, I've handled it, but it wasn't healthcare. It wasn't my role in surgical healthcare that I rebelled against. It was my role in the presumption of the identity and what I was doing. Like for instance, I would argue it started when I quit brain surgery. I was a highly trained, cranial neurosurgery, skull-based, cerebrovascular. Dr. Albert Roden was my chairman. He instilled most of the commitment and the obsession I have towards accuracy, anatomy, excellence, minimally invasive, max recovery, max philosophy for patient care. But, I didn't enjoy the institutionalization part of it. And so I had a little bit of an internal local rebellion that I would have left the region had I succumbed to staying in that one role. It was far easier for me to change my role. And I knew I was coming up with things in spine surgery that were interesting to me. And this was 97, 98, 99. And so I went all in and I committed 100%. I quit brain surgery on a Tuesday, came home, told my wife, she had no idea, built the next 25 years. I've had different versions of institutional based versus outpatient based versus blend versus hybrid. Types of insurances I agreed to take care of. To your point, I completely agree with you. It was never the role that we play within our community. It was the terms and the rules of engagement that we had to play those roles in. And I personally would rather push back. And I get enjoyment out of that. I get satisfaction out of that. Most importantly, I get a sense of control. I don't mind difficult. I mind impotence. And, what you were alluding to, that insane frustration that you don't have control, you don't have a voice, you have 1,000% of the responsibility and the burden, and yet you don't have any of the control. That to me is why too many doctors experience too much burnout. And so when I feel like that, I find a way to take back control. And it doesn't have to be a complete fix. It doesn't have to be a complete solution. I just need a win. And I need a win in a way that it resets my balance with the people I really care about taking care of, where I feel like I did something proactive to control their episodes of care, because I resent feeling like someone else is in control of our episode of care. And I don't know if that completely answers your question, but
Absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. Amanda, do you have any follow-up question regarding this struggle of surgeons in the healthcare system, especially hospitals? I think let's call it a spade. We are trying to help the patient, and our loyalty should be to patient, but more and more this hospital, they demand loyalty to them rather than to the patient. But Amanda, go ahead.
Well, it's not an uncommon issue that a lot of surgeons have. I see it all the time on LinkedIn, people talking about how much they love their job, but they hate the certain aspects of their job that are causing them to get burnt out. Actually, my question is even farther back. I have a question about when you were younger. Was being a neurosurgeon your first job that you wanted to have, like as a child?
No, not even close. Yeah, I never really wanted to be a doctor. You made another point about young people and the mission. I love being an advocate, and there are a lot of ways to be an advocate. And so the health educational pathway is priceless. And I wanted to be an astronaut. My grandfather was a test pilot. I grew up, single mom. Looked up to my grandfather. Always saw the stars and the moon and the sky as my future. I loved science. I loved math. I was biomedical engineering in college. I did an honors 7-year BSMD medical program, which I thought would tee me up academically to be an astronaut. There was a lot of space shuttle biomedical research being done, and I was doing research in neurosurgery. I was in the military and the Navy for a while, and all of those experiences, all of those skill sets, I thought as a immature young person would make me a shoo-in for getting into the astronaut program. And I was physically committed. I did everything I needed to do. So the Challenger blew up when I was a junior in medical school. That kind of killed the runway for what was possible. And Dr. Roden, Professor Roden, saw what I was doing in a microsurgery stem cells spinal cord injury lab. I was doing a lot of animal surgery on spinal cord injury models with stem cells, and insanely small surgeries compared to humans. And I was already doing them, and he invited me to apply for training in neurosurgery. I accepted the application. I applied. I got in. I never looked back. So that was the first time I ever realized I was going to be a doctor. Yeah.
Beautiful. That was a very pivotal moment for you. Did you stay in touch with that professor?
Oh yeah, he's an icon in neurosurgery, and until the day he died, I was very, very close with him. Huge influence.
He's a legend. Dr. Rotan is actually a legend. A small little anecdote. I met him once, and he told me a story that really has stuck with me. That once he went to a surgical room, observing another surgeon using the Rotan set, and Amanda, the Rotan set is a very crucial set of instrument for microsurgery. They are very fine tips instrument to help us to do surgery. He told me that, he went there and anonymously, and he was that the surgeon asked for Rotan set and so on, and they didn't know who he is. So he asked the nurse there, what is the Rotan set and so on. And the nurse answered him that that's a very special kind of metal and so on, whereas the set is named after him. It's not a kind of metal, but it is his name on that. But the nurse was trying to explain what kind of special metal that is that it's called after. So I'm sure he has told you that story as well a few times.
No, he was capable of the stuff of legends, and it was like Superman. He had super incredible metal to build the best tools. But no, he was really the pioneer and the father of modern microneurosurgical anatomy and precision pathways to brain surgery. And and I would argue that we're carrying on his legacy by precision pathways towards minimally invasive rapid recovery spine surgery. And accuracy is key, and targeting is key. And so he lives on forever through efforts of people like you and me. So, and I hope we influence quite a few people too. So.
When did you know, Robert, that how old were you when you knew you're going to be a neurosurgeon?
Yeah, so I was lucky in the sense that I was pretty driven and pretty early. I finished high school when I was 16. And so I did a 7-year BSMD honors program. And so I guess it was early senior year, 1987. So I was 24. Yeah, so I was pretty young at that point.
What was the alternative? Because I remember in my time, I honestly didn't have any alternatives, but what was your alternative?
Really, it was astronaut until that wasn't a runway, and then it became neurosurgery. I've never had a job. I'm lucky that way. I've always done what I loved or what I was dreaming about, and I've never stopped. But it's funny I say that, and the reality is all those pivotal moments we were talking about, where I felt the burnout, I started to feel like I had a job, and that's the end of that.
Well, that's probably why you're so unafraid of pushing back or like doing exactly what you want to do, not really caring about how other people feel or might think about it.
Yeah, we're in a service industry. We're in the ultimate service industry. So it's really easy to feel strongly about what you want to do within it, because at the end of the day, it's still benevolent. It's still pro-positive. If we're at our best selves, we're still helping incredibly to so many people. So why not do it our way? I've never quite understood why we would be so apologetic for telling the world how we want to do what we do to serve people, because no matter what, we serve people. So, it was easy for me to feel very, very passionate about it.
That's very
I
true.
can tell a lot of stories about my residency, but I want to know, and people cannot imagine what we go through in the residency. And your residency and mine was before all those 80-hour rules and so on and so forth.
Oh yeah.
So
No.
I want to know your story.
I'm going to give you my story. I'm going to go way off piste and give you my story relative to how I met my wife. It might embarrass her a little bit, but it was, I try to remember it was 1991. So I was a third year resident. It was a Thursday night at Chili's in Gainesville. And we met. We were out till 4 a.m. Absolutely fell head over heels first day. And but I had to be at the hospital at Shands at 5:30 in the morning for an every other day overnight shift in-house. So
Yes.
5:30. So Friday 5:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock on Saturday night in my shift, and I slept probably an hour and a half in the call room. And then first thing I did, hey, you want to go to dinner? Went out, was up till 4 in the morning again. Cycle repeat, 5:30 in the morning, back on call until Monday. First thing I did, call on Monday night. And so,
did she know what you have been doing between those calls?
They know, wow, he's at the hospital, he's at work, but they don't know. But you're running, you're going 100 miles an hour backwards. And, but so for 5-6 days, I probably slept 2 hours. And that was enigmatic to the entire 5 of 7 years of my residency, because we were on every other night in-house call 5 of the 7 years. And that was just the way it was. But honestly, it was a different culture, because I'm sure you remember this well. We looked forward to nighttime because that's when we got to do everything. And I got so much incredible technical independence during residency. And that's one of the losses with the better balance and the more humane, work efforts. I remember vividly when the Cornell bacterial meningitis thing happened and all the laws came out about residency, and it was a liability play. But the reality is, it affected our attitude and our personality, but I don't think it honestly affected our capabilities. I learned so much during those night times, and I loved it. That's when I got to be in charge, and I looked forward to that. But every generation has its rules of engagement and the way things are done, and I think it is a lot more consistent and more easily managed. But we lived in the world where neurosurgery and cardiothoracic surgery really did it differently, and so for better or worse, we thrived in it, and I think it shows these days. So
it is hard to go through that and have still your energy. I remember as well those calls, those nights that we worked 36 hours. We worked 36 hours. We didn't sit around and so on. But then you go home, you still have to have some life. And you can tell people how it is to sleep 2 hours, 3 hours at time and so on. And I think they hear the word, but I don't believe that people who have not gone through that can mentally or emotionally really understand that what that really means to go through that. Like I remember that I was doing one of these 18-hour surgeries, and obviously as a resident, most of the time you are observing, you're not doing the surgery. Right. And I remember those naps I got while I was irrigating. They didn't have even irrigation bipolars. I was just, my subconscious was irrigating while I was taking a nap, or almost sound right that sometimes I was sleeping while I was walking. I have
right.
slept a lot when I was sitting, but hence the rules of surgery. Eat when you can, sleep when you can, and I'm not going to say the third one is not appropriate. You know
That's
that?
fair. Well, we have to balance all of that in,
Yeah.
including the third one. So yeah, somehow that happened. So no, anyway, no, I think it was a unique time and a unique era. I've talked to friends about that era. And, I thought about the title of a book being, and then there was Camelot, because it was a pretty special era in American healthcare, where it was just different. It was a little more. The leadership was more more doctor oriented. It wasn't so institutional. I think doctors, in a way, kind of dropped the ball as a group, and allowed too many other stakeholders to gain too much leadership. I've built strong relationships with. I don't want it to be a negative against all administrative healthcare, but it's just amazing how the culture shifts with a new hire, or with a transcendence of one. You build a partnership with one administrator, and you build this program, and you build this priority and this focus, and in a blink of an eye, that job position changes. Everything is completely pivoted, and you're starting from scratch, and you literally destroy valuable programs to large communities with no basis other than a career move. And that's frustrating. That is really frustrating.
Robert, actually, I would love if you would talk about that, because I think you and I have gone through the same struggle with the hospital administration and administration in the healthcare as a general. This is a statistic, whereas the providers, which is all doctors and nurses, have grown 5%, 10%, 15% in last 40 years. The administration has grown 4,000% in the last.
Right.
And they just create administrator to administer administrators. And I think medicine has no future if you and we don't talk about this truly fundamental flaw in our healthcare, that you and I, who are providing the care to the patient, are pushed to the side. But especially bigger the healthcare systems are, more malignant they have become. I can just tell you that even in a small city, I'm not going to say the names, where there were two big hospital systems, they would fight each other to the teeth, and then the price had to be paid by patient and the doctors. And the bigger they are, more malignant they have become in providing this shift in paradigm, that what matters, they want you to be part of their system and have loyalty to them. I think we have to talk about that for people who are going to join, be our future.
I have pretty strong opinions about that, and it's hard though, because I remember being so in the moment and aspirational. So I can empathize with a young surgeon who gets offered a really prestigious new role in a relatively important regional healthcare institution, and at the time it feels like they're being given this tremendous badge of honor, and they're going to have so much leadership and so much role, but so oftentimes they're replacing the last version of themselves, who became a little too disruptive and a little too potent and a little too powerful. And I don't, most of our strength in taking those jobs happens very early. And unless there's a way, I have friends who have managed to assume a leadership position as a young surgeon in those institutions, who were so laser focused and prepared that they maintained that career long. But that's the exception. That's not the rule. What typically happens is somebody gets a 5-year contract. They play the role for 5 years. They become a puppet to the system. They have all the prestige, all the power, right up until the point that their salary is capped arbitrarily at the contract change. And then they know, because of their no competes and their complete inability to navigate their patient community, should they refuse it, that they have no power. And now they've muted themselves and the next person, and cycle repeat. And so that's the game. That's the institutional game. And right now we're at the apex of popularity of that game. I think it's something like 83% of all surgeons are employed by major institutions right now. So, it doesn't have to be that way. I'm not by no means insinuating that all of those people are that, but I wish there was a little more effort to take the hard lines, to take the difficult positions, to make administration uncomfortable, to jeopardize their security. Because, if everybody in a tiny little way push back a little bit on behalf of the real master, the community of patients, the overall C would raise, and the control and the stability in those positions would increase, because there wouldn't be that confidence that someone else would pick up where that last failure fell off. I can't tell you how many brilliant young neurosurgeons I've watched come and go. Orlando, oh my God. If you look at Orlando in 25 years, it is a Rolodex of high-level, high-trained neurosurgeons. And I guess one of the things I have to say I'm most proud of is I've somehow survived for 25 years here and thrived. But ironically, I held them hostage. They didn't hold me hostage. So maybe that was the key.
But you're one and only. You're one and only, and you excluded yourself from their power domain. I think you have your own. Tell me about your. We will talk in the next podcast about what's the future, about your professional. But I think there are two reasons that you not only survive but thrive: is your personality, but as well your risk taking to build something that you can provide your service independent from those systems. Those young people, especially young residents, they need to know being employed by a hospital is not the only option. Tell us about that.
Right. Yeah, no, I still think there are several roles you can play with a brilliant medical education. So back to your original point, before I get to the answer of that question, to any young person, whether it's your kids or my kids, or, I think learning the healthcare, biotech, biomedical, and then particularly in the information age and Web 4.0, the applications of all of this knowledge and all of this education are so diverse and so brilliant. So whether you are a treating physician, a researcher, a leader in innovation, an entrepreneur, a software developer, it's a brilliant career path. But let's say you pick the clinical pathway, and obviously independent practice is still key, but you don't play the sport the way you play institutional. If you're institutional, it's going to be much more emergency based, much more call based, much more referrals from systems, from emergency medical services, from under-needed populations within your region. There's a different demographic. If you're going to go independent private practice, you have to have a more forward-facing community base. You have to actually talk to your community. You have to nurture it and build a confidence level and a structure of relationship with your community. And we've heavily focused on being part of our community, not against our community. And I think, it's funny when you look at surgeons within hospital systems, they're so adversarial. They're so my way or the highway. To who? To the people they serve. And it's almost laughable because we play a different sport. It's really easy to beat that. And they arbitrarily have 6-month wait lists. That's ridiculous. If you invest a little bit of preparation, a little bit of nuance about what you do well and only do that well and compete at the world level in all that you do, it's pretty easy to beat them at your sport. They play a completely different sport, but every generation of new doc that takes that role, it's their job to try to beat you, but they don't even understand they're not playing the same game. And, and I think so for young docs coming in, I encourage them in undergrad to take more business classes, to take economics, to understand social theory, to understand, social entrepreneurship and the lack of equitization of healthcare worldwide, because I think it'll give them a little more ground perspective of how much they can do to impact the world if they choose a healthcare profession. It's exciting if you really look at it philosophically. But when you get funneled into this gerbil wheel of producing doctors for institutional box filling, it's a dead end in a lot of emotional ways. It can be brilliant, but I think independence, autonomy, your own dream making, whatever, we all have such different passion buttons and what about a job inspires us. And I think that's the brilliance of healthcare. It really can be all of that. But, our system tries to funnel us into a very tiny little box. And so I would argue that's the best opportunity in healthcare.
That's very well said. I think it's something that a lot of people could stand to hear, especially being that, like we said before, this is not an uncommon issue that doctors are in. I know that you already said before, you've always been an envelope pusher or someone who pushes back and doesn't resist. But if you could give any advice to someone, a newer surgeon or a younger surgeon who's in a similar position to what we just described, what would you say to them?
Be yourself first and foremost. You've got to live with that for the rest of your life. Don't hesitate. Don't be unapologetic. Don't even think about anything but do it your way. When you get out of training, you've been taught everybody else's way of doing things, and you have to meet that standard, no question. And I always talk about the trimesters of a surgeon's career. First trimester, you're trying to figure out who the hell you think you are, because you grew up in training, learning everybody else's philosophies, structure, techniques, procedures, the way they do things. First trimester of your practice, you're trying to figure out what you think and how you do it. And then comes your obligation to transcend your master. Nobody that I respected growing up ever wanted me to do anything but beat them, because that would validate their training, right? So we don't have to apologize for wanting to push past our masters, our mentors, our the people that inspired us. That's a good thing. So transcend, don't stay static, because that's exactly neutrality. Second trimester, you crank, you do what you do best. You're absolutely in crank mode right now, and it's fun to watch. Third trimester, you get old and you start talking about it, and maybe the fish get a little bigger than they might have been, but you talk a lot. I think there's a lot of truth to that kind of breakdown. So, unapologetic pursuit of the person they want to be while growing perpetually. The biggest opportunity is when you finish medical school, that is not your license to practice. That is what it's represented as. That's your learner's permit. And the most brilliant thing about medical profession is it's lifelong growth if you allow it to be. And I can't tell you how many doctors I know who don't grow. They just check boxes. And that's sad, because it's amazing how much things have changed since I started 35 years ago.
I have seen you a few times on the picture on a race car. So,
yes, sir.
Now, tell me a little about that. What I mean, that is truly, pushing the envelope, pushing the limitation. Tell me a little about that.
Yeah, it's funny, because that's going to bounce off of a couple of things we've talked about, and it might surprise you how it started. The astronaut side of me, the adventure. I've been a pilot for 34 years. I fly a twin engine Baron. I've always sort of still chased that path privately, but the real reason why the race car driving, one, I've always loved racing. I love motorsports. I love cars. I love airplanes. I love boats. I love rocket ships, exploration. I'm a little kid at heart. I still fantasize and dream about those things and watch TV shows and movies about those things. So, but when my oldest son was the one who really probably got me the least when he was growing up. And so it was his 16th birthday. He always wanted to kart, and his mom and I wouldn't let him. And so he really, really made it clear that he loved motorsports. He loved racing. So for his 16th birthday, I got him a Skip Barber Racing School thing, and I chaperoned him there. Make a long story short, I was a dad sitting there watching their kids going to racing school, and I couldn't handle watching, so I signed up. And next thing you know, he was beating me. I mean, day one, and so I naturally I fought back, and I started trying to beat him, and that meant I tried harder, and he still beat me, and we just kept going, and then me chasing him and him going out of his way to beat me. Before you knew it, he won the Rolex 24 in 2017 in a prototype, and I was in the league right below him 1 year, and I had just won my little championship, and so I got to ascend to the big stage with him, and before you knew it, we got to race in 2 Rolex 24s together, in a
Wow.
Felipe Nasser and Juan Pablo Montoya and Fernando Alonso, and all these guys are right on track with me. And but it was all me chasing my kid. From my perspective, I was just trying to beat Kyle.
Yeah. So who won? Who won in that one?
Always, I never beat him once. But as teammates, we were second place in the 2019 Rolex 24. So that was pretty cool.
That's
I just
impressive.
I apologize. Go ahead, Amanda.
No, I was just saying that's very impressive.
Yeah. But yeah, at the end of it all, what I really did privately was I architected my little software project that you know about, by analyzing motorsports to the nth degree, and then saying, okay, how am I going to bring surgical healthcare to the same level of data and predictive analytics and machine learning and performance metrics that F1 is? And I used the racing journey to architect the entire thing.
I just saw a meme on TikTok said, your father is the only person who's going to be happy if you are better than him. So I applaud that what you just described, and I know in the bottom of your heart, every time he succeeds and beats you, a part of your heart grows a little fonder of him.
Oh, no question. I still hate to lose, but no, it's priceless to have your kids transcend you. That's what we want. That's what we all want. So it was a priceless experience. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah.
And you're a pilot as well, so you fly a twin engine?
Yeah. So 34 years. I never got to jets. I always kind of wanted to get to jets, and it's a little out of our reach financially. It doesn't make we can't burn money, it turns out. So,
well, who knows what the future is? You are active in so many areas. Now, what is the best and worst moment in your flying career with your airplane? I'm hoping that it always have been good and so on. And I'm a pilot myself, by the way, and I can tell you my best and worst, but it's about you. Tell me your best memory of flying and your worst memory of flying.
Now, I'm curious about yours too. As surgeons, we experience, situational awareness and how we handle things that don't quite go our way all the time. When it's flying, it's a little more real because, theoretically you could die. But, I've had a few episodes. I had to land, I had a VTOL Bonanza and I had engine failure, had to land in a field in Oregon. And, I was way early. I knew where I was going to start the braking process. I had a recurring fantasy always flying. I always knew I only had to manage rollout speed, because if I could hit something at less than 50 knots, I could walk away. So the goal was always not to not crash the plane. It was to walk away. And so I always had a plan, and it was always to get my airspeed and my ground speed down to less than 50, just in case. So in that case, I stopped and rolled out on a little dirt road. It had more bumps than I expected, and the hardest part was figuring out a way to get the plane shipped back to an airport so I could have it fixed. I had the Baron. I flew back from Vegas. I decided to go to one of our Mary West courses where I was teaching. I flew myself from Florida there. And I did some, West Texas shooting, and I played a lot. but in a big Texas thunderstorm, I lost my right engine, and I had to limp along for an hour and 45 minutes, and
Wow.
80 knot tailwind and a Texas thunderstorm at night.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've flown over West Texas, but
No.
there are airstrips everywhere on your maps and your GPSs and stuff, but it's all canyon country and trees and rocks and they're all unmarked. There's not a light for 2 hours. You don't
Yeah.
till you get to Del Rio, Texas, or San Antonio or Austin. There's nothing. So
Oh.
you're just limping along, looking at maps, wondering if you should even consider it. But there's no way you could see. It's black. It's black West Texas night. So that was the funny thing. But I remember talking to Texas radio, and he was really serious, and he was like, is there anything we can do? You've got another hour to go, and I was on my way to Del Rio. I was like, yeah, this is important. Would you call my wife? Yeah, what? I was like, I need you to ask her something. He goes, what? Anything? I said, you tell her I need another engine. And the stage. So those are my two events. Otherwise, it's just stay out of trouble. Stay way ahead.
But what was your best experience in flying? But I know the adrenaline, that's all the time, but was a single moment that you said, I'm so happy to be here right now?
I flew into Roche Harbor in the San Juan Islands and off Seattle once, and it was a beautiful day. I was coming into a sunset, and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and I think there were what are they called? Type of, I can't remember the animal, but there was a llama farm, and it was absolute alpaca. It was an alpaca farm, and it was just this beautiful, perfect day, perfect sunset. I was coming in uphill, and I think that was the most beautiful time. I've flown so much in the Pacific Northwest, and every one of those experiences, I felt that way. I used to fly into the crater of Mount St. Helens and do chandelles and fly out. That was fun. I just all these private little moments, but I don't know that there's one. I think for me it was more the feeling of flying and the freedom, and there's a moment where on a certain flight you kind of lose yourself, and I remember that feeling a lot. But I could never predict when I was going to find that feeling. But when I had it, it was that amazing transcendence. So I miss that because I haven't had that in a little while. I've been a bus driver lately. So
bus driver?
Yeah, just flying and people around,
Yeah, that kind of bus driver. So I'm going to tell you one of my experience. I was still VFR, and I'm flying in Midwest, and all of a sudden weather changes. There are clouds, and the clouds are getting lower, and I'm VFR, visual flight rule. I'm not allowed to be in the cloud, but the clouds are getting lower and lower.
Yeah.
And the only other option I have is land, and there is lots of trees. There is nowhere to land.
Right.
So I actually then have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I just find a strip to land, or do I go through the cloud? And obviously I decided doesn't matter. I have to do the safe thing. I take to the cloud, and I'm 10 minutes in the cloud. I'm climbing as much as I can. And then all of a sudden, after almost 7-10 minutes, well, maybe it felt like 2 hours, but it was probably 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah.
I come out of the cloud, and right at the horizon is the moon.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
And I'm just going over the cloud with the moon. So that was my best experience.
That's a beautiful experience. Well, that's a worst goes to best quickly. So it does feel like a long time. No, I had an experience like that in the Pacific Northwest where I had no choice. I had to go in the clouds, but started picking up ice, and the airspeed started slowing, and so that was a little stressful. That was one I could have lost, but
so if that's my best experience, you can imagine what my worst experience goes. Now, I think we have only time for a few more questions. Amanda, do you have any additional follow-up question?
Yeah, I have one additional question, and then I think that if we want to do the future of spine, we should do that right away. My follow-up question is, following your path, have your children picked up an interest in surgery?
So yes and no. They're both working on my software startup. And Brett did social entrepreneurship in a BS MBA program. And then he knew he wanted to go into MBA. His passion, Kyle too. Kyle was a race car driver, but he also was a high level gamer and heavy into computer simulation and computing systems. And so, you know, our family business has kind of been healthcare in the sense that I own two facilities. I have a surgery facility in Park City, Utah. I have a surgery facility in Orlando. I built the first spine center of excellence in the hospitals. We were the first JACO spine center of excellence in the East US. And, you know, I had to fight uphill within Orlando Health to get that done. And we did. And that taught us everything we wanted to know in the early 2011-12 era to really push in our independent outpatient spine surgery stuff. So I've been working outpatient surgery on major reconstructions for 10, 11 years. So the kids grew up with all that, and you know, and they're computing, and we have a pretty entrepreneurial little environment here, and they're both working in the startup. And so they're probably going to have a bigger impact on healthcare than I ever had. That's what I forecast if I had to guess.
Yeah, that's really special. A lot of times you can go either way. Sometimes the kids love what the parents are doing, and sometimes they only see the bad parts and end up going like the polar opposite direction.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the whole family, my wife's a PT in training, but she's gone into business as well. You know, the industry is amazing. It's a win-win-win. I love working in projects where everybody wins if we're doing a good job. So if your outcome is great, everybody does well. Perfect. What a great way to succeed. And so it was easy. In business, it doesn't always feel that way, but healthcare business done well, done right, you can impact a lot of people. And so I think our natural tendency is definitely going to be driven towards healthcare. So far, nobody wants to be a doctor. My fifth child is a little girl. I could easily see her being a surgeon. She's pretty fierce. So we'll see.
How old is she?
She's only 11, so she's got
okay.
a way. Yeah, my oldest is 26 and my daughter's 11. So, yeah.
Well, Amanda, I think we have to move to the next session, but it was such a pleasure, Robert, to hear your story firsthand.
Thank you.
Any closing remarks, Amanda?
I'm just going to sign off unless you have any. Thank you guys for joining. This was a surgeon's journey. My name is Amanda Armagast.
And I'm Dr. Abbasi for Essence. And Robert, please introduce yourself for people who don't know exactly who you are, but they will know after this who you are.
Yes, sir. I'm Robert Masson. I'm a neurosurgeon in Orlando, Florida, and I like cars and planes. So,
and if you have any problem with the spine in Orlando, you know who to go to. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thanks, guys. Join us in a few minutes while we talk about the future of spine care.
Thank you.